like to bring the meeting to order. Welcome to everyone. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Miss Rossman, it's a surprise to see you tonight. Welcome. Oh, wait, hold that one thought though. Stay right there. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Public comment from Melinda Rossman. Hello.
Hi. Hey, I wrote a whole speech in my pocket, but I don't need it.
Okay.
You know, when I was in college, I worked for the college newspaper and the college radio station. And you had to have an FCC license. That was at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado, in my undergrad. And when having an FCC license was a sense of integrity, and you were telling the truth, and you were held accountable. Couldn't editorialize a report. It had to be just the facts, be it on the radio or in the newspaper. And there was such a pride in having your FCC license. You know, you applied for it, there was an ownership to it. And I'm just so disappointed in what's going on in our mainstream media today because there's no accountability. You know, FCC went out the window just around, I most noticeably noticed it in 2009. So I really feel like what we're hearing in today's modern media is not the truth in a lot of facets. And one of the truths that's got me really riled right now is critical race theory. And what was presented in legislation 3 weeks ago in the state of Idaho. And the fact that it was very close in its vote, which was disturbing to me, that people would support this lie, this re-education of thinking to our youth in elementary schools. It's scary. And if you haven't done the research, I was at a dinner party this last weekend, and there were 8 families there, and when all the kids were outside playing, I was talking to a bunch of adults, and I said, what do you know about critical race theory? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you need to just Google it, give me a call tomorrow, let me know what you find out. And oh my God, I got phone call after phone call after phone call on Sunday, people going, oh my God, we got to stop this from happening in our communities, in our schools. A friend of mine this Sunday called me from Alberta, Canada, and said, I just pulled my kids out of school. And I go, why? Because my middle school son came home and he was tasked to write a report apologizing for being white to people of color. We should not be teaching this to any children. This should not even be brought into the realm of elementary school education and put into our children's minds. What we should be putting into our children's mind is diversity is beautiful. Excellence among diversity is what we should strive for. We should be teaching our children what excellence looks like, not writing apology notes for something we have nothing and are not responsible for from 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. We should not be teaching our children that they're wrong simply by the color of their skin. And that's what critical race theory is going to bring to the table if we allow it into our schools. So I asked the superintendent, Tom Albertson, when you go to superintendent meetings in the state of Idaho, could you please speak against this? Board of Education, when you go to the board meetings amongst other state board members, please speak against this atrocity. This is pollution, this is propaganda, and it should not be in our school system. Please support stopping this horrible, horrible agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, that was the only one for public comment. So at this time, we have a school presentation by Principal Jeff Penrose for the Lake Pond High School. Hello.
Hello, good to see you all. Thanks for having me here
Thanks for
tonight.
coming.
I will keep this brief. I just want to start out by saying that this year we have a teacher in our school named Chef Rand, who, when he's having a particularly challenging day, he always says, "Boy, that student really gave me ample opportunity to practice patience today." He spends it, he says, "Boy, I really had a chance to practice patience." And this past year has really been an ample opportunity for our whole school to practice patience and growth and rethinking and efficiencies and all kinds of stuff. It has been a real challenge for us, as you'll see in some of the stats that I'll show you. But I think we're getting through it. I think we're moving forward, and we're very much looking forward to hopefully fairly normal operations next year, because we have some ground to make up, as you'll see. The first thing is learning loss, maybe. We map test every 9th, 10th, and 11th grader every fall and every spring, across the board in the school. And when we tested from fall to fall, 2020 to 2021, we found we did not have much learning loss, actually. Now our N is small, but we had 3 solid quarters of school, and in our 4x4 schedule, many students got all of their math and all of their English in that first semester. So we don't have a ton of learning loss. As you see, we were in the 99th percentile, the growth percentile, which is compared to all MAP schools, all MAP takers, in both 10th and 11th grade in ELA. So that means they grew more than even imagine, really, in terms of ELA. And in math, 10th graders were in the 95th percentile, and 11th graders were in the 99th percentile. That's growth, not achievement. I'm sure you're familiar with the MAP test, but that means that most of our students vastly exceeded what expected growth was for fall to fall. So that was good news. But we definitely have some credit loss that we are really going to have to work to get after. If you're looking up here, I was talking with Pearlie earlier that Tyler has a really nice grade distribution report that I've really started integrating in what I do. So we can really pretty accurately look at our grade distribution, and you'll see that in 18-19, the school year, for the entire year, sorry, I have that in the wrong place, the 78%, that's in the wrong place. 18-19, we had 12% roughly Fs in our entire school. That's all kids, all received grades. In 19-20, that went to 33%. And in 4th quarter, you'll see that that's in the wrong place. 78% of the grades we gave out in that during the shutdown were Fs.
Oh.
It was brutal. Our students are at risk, as you know. They're there for the connections. We talk about rigor, relevance, and relationships. It's the relationships that really fell apart for us. I mean, we called. My staff did such an amazing job of reaching out. Please come in we'll sit across from each other at a 6-foot table. But many of our kids just stopped going. And that's even, according to the district policy, we gave incompletes, or IPs, I believe it was, across the board, giving them the option to make it up later. Most did not. So it was brutal. And we're seeing this year still a continuation of that trend, but we're ticking back up. So far this year, we've had 22% Fs handed out because of the shortened time. We don't have enough time in the day to do it. As you know, up until till the shutdown, we considered ourselves a no homework school. We make a deal with every student. You come every day you're physically able, at least 90% of the time. Give us the best you have to give on that day, every day, and we're not going to load you up with a bunch of homework at the end of the day. It's a pretty fair deal. As soon as you stop coming to school, though, that's on you. You got to make it up. But during the shutdown, and because we have such a short time, we say, no, you have to do some homework now, and our students are really struggling with that. We have so many students who are staying after school still. Even today, we have a dozen kids who are staying after trying to get that work done. But it's hard. It's hard. So we have some ground to make up in that way. We are putting in a flex period next quarter, our next year. My staff will take a final vote on the bell schedule tomorrow. But we're going to have a flex period on Wednesdays at least to start, where we will group and regroup students and try to recapture and really lower that number of Fs. Because in the end, we take very seriously our job to produce well-educated citizens with high school diplomas for this community, and we did have a drop in our graduation rate after last year. So in 18-19, we hit our high peak since ever at 75%, which, as I explained to you guys before, is very high for an alternative school in the state of Idaho. We dropped down to 49% last year, and I take some personal responsibility for that. although it was a staff, very robust discussion where we decided we just were not going to hand out the waivers. And we really believe that most folks would follow that also. Turns out that's not so true because the graduation rate in the state of Idaho actually went up last year as a state, much to my surprise. So I feel like I was kind of out of step with my colleagues there, but we're very confident that we did the best thing for students by holding them to firm and high standards for their graduation. So it has been an ample opportunity to practice patience. But we've also had ample opportunity for hope. We're very proud that we went through the accreditation process this year in the midst of this pandemic, which made it a little weird. But if you're familiar with accreditation, the Cognia Corporation, I guess it is, sums all of their information into one neat little number. It's called the Index of Educational Quality, the IEQ score. Ours was 320 this year. And 320 is up 48 points from 5 years ago when we were accredited, the first time since I've been there. The network average in all of the schools in Cognia, that's international, boarding schools, private schools, all schools, is 278 to 283.
Wow.
So 5 years ago, we were at the lower end of that. This year, we're above that. To put that in perspective, yeah, thanks. To put that in perspective, comparators like Moscow High School is at 311. So and Lakeland High School is at 333, right? So as an alternative school with 100% at-risk students, we achieved a 320, and that is entirely attributed to the hard work that the LPOHS staff, the teachers, the parapros, everybody have put in over the last 5 years. We took that 278 pretty personally, and we put some stuff in place to really know that next time it came around, we would be recognized as the excellent school we are. The graduation rate hurts us. We'll get that back up. The next thing is our student engagement is really high. We have a survey that every teacher administers every quarter in every class. We've been doing it for 3 years. We had some data glitches the first year, but we have 1,130 responses so far to this survey over the last 2 years. And I would put our numbers up against any school in the world. When you ask students in a school, do you believe the teacher in this class really cares about you? If you have 92% of your students saying, yeah, I really believe that, that's really high. It's awesome. My teacher responds well to student misbehaviors. 94% say, yeah, I think that's handled pretty well. In this class, we learn to correct our mistakes. That's a huge one. If you really engage in learning and you're not turning in work just to get the grade, if you're actually learning to correct your mistakes, 94.16 also. I like the way we learn in this class, 87.26. All those, and I have the full sheet for you if you guys want to look at it. I've only brought 4 copies, but just to give you a taste of what it's all about. I don't need 4 copies. I'm not sure
That's
why.
okay. I can
We
look
can
at
share.
on with
Yeah,
Lonnie right here.
you guys can share it? That's
Yeah.
great. Sharing is caring.
We're good sharers.
Good
Nice.
share it. And this is just
Oh, sure.
because we're very proud of this data. And when you think about it, again, we are a school of 100% of students who at some point in their career became very disaffected with education and said, yeah, I'm not sure I even want to continue in education. To have students producing these kinds of numbers now over 6 quarters worth of data, really makes us feel like we're headed in the right direction. The lowest one of all of them is this one. I can see how this class applies to my future goals, 78%. But again, I would challenge you to ask 100 random high school students in America, does this class apply to your future goals? And if 78% of them say, yeah, I can see that, you're doing something pretty good. Having said that, we're going to attack that number. We're going to say, okay, what can we do to raise that by 5 percentage points or whatever? How do we explicitly get students to understand that Alg 2 is going to help them as a whatever? Yeah. So we're working very hard on that. And I think this is the best representation of the fact that I have the most amazing staff. They come to work every day, and they work on the science of teaching, but the art of teaching is where they really hit their stride. And they are able to make connections with these students who are pretty darn resistant to making connections sometimes. And they do that through persistence, they do that through compassion, they do that through gratitude, and they do it every day, day in, day out, and I could not be prouder to even be associated with them. All right? With that, and then finally, I got the date right here, brother. It's June 10th, the day wrong on my own graduation. We are hopefully graduating 27 young people on June 10th. Some of them are students who should have graduated last year, so it's a slightly bigger class. We're very, very happy to do that, and we're very happy that we're going to have a more or less normal one, and we invite you all to come and celebrate them. All right?
Great, thank you.
Yes, any questions? Yeah.
What is your current enrollment, and what's been the range this school year?
We really, 100 is our number. We stick there pretty religiously because it just kind of self-regulating organism. If we get much above 100, students aren't getting the attention that they need, and they start to drift away. And if we get below, they start telling their friends how awesome it is, and they start trickling in. So we've been between 97 and 100 all year. We're at 97 right now.
So then you hit on my other question here. You said you lost a lot of students during the distance learning, last spring.
Yeah.
Were you able to recapture,
We were, yeah, and I suspect that number was gonna go up because the credit loss that's happening is happening everywhere. And we are kind of bracing ourselves for a wave of students coming our way. The students who didn't participate in whatever school they're in are gonna end up looking at their junior, senior year and start doing the math and saying, oh my goodness, I need to make up some ground here.
Yeah.
So I suspect that's likely to happen. But we kind of expected it this year, but I don't think as a nation we're quite back fully into school mode, most of it. And so there's kind of we'll just wait and see what happens thing. But I suspect it will be up a bit next year. But when I say we lost students, I don't mean they disenrolled. They just stopped doing work. They just checked out. We called and we begged and we cajoled and we set up, drive-through packet pickup in the parking lot and begged them to come in, and it was just a weird time for the entire nation, but especially for students who are living in poverty or at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many teachers do you have?
We have 10 teachers. One's half-time teachers, so we have 9.5 FTE.
And just so the board knows, the physical, space, we say the max that we could be is 125, but that would be
Bursting at the seams.
pushing the
Right.
space.
That would be rough, yeah. And we were bracing for the. We have been as high, I think, as 120 in my 8 years there, and just what I told you about happened. The kids just were not getting what they needed. They made those personal connections with teachers, and they just kind of started drifting away, and we found ourselves right back at 100.
Do you think that if you had 11 or 12 staff that you could handle 125 or 120?
We don't have physical space for it.
Physical space.
We don't have every classroom is used. I don't have it. Like if I want to have a meeting with students, there's not a single place I can go except for my own office. There's not a single unoccupied space right now, especially since we don't have any prep times right now.
Okay.
So we are
You're maxed.
bell to bell maxed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, distance learning is just not effective with your students.
I would argue it's not effective for very many students, but especially with ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
The Zoom meetings. I had an expectation that teachers would have office hours, and the teachers say, "I'm here, Jeff, but there's just nobody here. There's
Yeah.
nobody here with me."
Yeah.
And it happened again and again, and we did our best,
Sure.
but it was tough. It was tough. But we're going to dig in, and it's one of the reasons we graduated at the 46, the state requirement. There's room to make up for most of our students. I have yet to waive a single credit for a graduate, and we had 6 seniors go out today with close contact or COVID, which was a big blow to our school. The kind of 2 weeks after masks came
Yeah.
off, 2 weeks after spring break kind of happened today. We were a little worried about that, and it all happened today. So we have 6 seniors who are out. We're a little worried about that. We'll see what happens. I told them all, I said, this is not going to stop from graduating. We'll figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
But it was a...
But they got to make the effort.
Oh, yeah. Oh, online learning's gone much better this year in that we just said no a lot. We just said, what we did is we set up a survey, and our students are required to log in during each class period. during each class period on a Google survey, state what their intention is to work on, and then I go on Schoology and see if the software actually work on it. So we don't automatically give a V or an O or whatever the code is to a student. If they don't log into the survey during the class and do work during the class and complete the assignment, they aren't counted as present during online learning. So eventually students got the message it was a whole lot easier just to come to school. So we do not currently, notwithstanding the 6 who left today, we don't have a single student who's officially online learning.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Anything else?
thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep. And at this time, I don't want to rush you off the
Oh, go ahead.
At
Play the
this
music.
time, Matt Deal is going to present to us on a facility report, an update.
Yeah, so we did end up with another steam leak at the middle school. So it actually ended up being about 12 feet from the last one was, and my best guess is when we jackhammered up the floor, I think it probably, shook the fragile pipes and caused another leak. So
Right.
that did happen, but
Yeah, you gave away mine.
I'm
That one was
gonna
mine.
go over Clark
I
Fork
need that back.
tonight and Lake Pondere High School.
Okay,
And I'll start with Clark Fork. So
great.
the old portion of the building was built in 1928. Again, I'm going over the 2018 facility report that we've been going over by Longwell Track. Original school was built in 1928 with additions, the best we can tell, in 52, 75, and 91. There was some a little bit of remodel. Even though the report says there was a little bit of remodel. We learned a little more about that. This winter, the school started noticing some more settling in the ground, in the building, and some more cracking on the front of the building. So we did have a structural engineer out and explored those things, and they said it's safe. Nothing's gonna. There's nothing unsafe about it. But what it is there's some really old pieces of the building in there and there is some settling and some cracking in the, not in the foundation, but in the concrete slab under the carpet. So there's no, and you can feel it if you walk on it. There's no tripping hazards or anything like that, but it is an area of the building that was remodeled. And we will also be doing this summer some repairs on the front of the building to some of the surfacing where there is a little moisture getting behind the stucco. So that's going on. The exterior of the building, other than that front, is in fairly good shape with the exception of the gymnasium roof. That's nearing the end of its lifespan, and you can see there's some weightiness. So when we do replace that roof, we'll need to possibly replace the decking on it.
What material is that?
That's a composition shingle roof.
Okay.
And so that's out there in the not too far, but it's not there's no active leaks. The report does talk about the parking lot lights recommended converting to LED. We've done that since the time of this report. The report also does talk about an old heating oil tank that's buried on the school. We've also dealt with that. So we had a company come out and remove, I think there was 1,000 gallons of old heating oil in it. And then they cleaned the tank. And then we opted to have them fill the tank in place and left it there. So the tank that's talked about, the non-registered tank, that's dealt with.
Just looking for where that is in this report.
Down in when it gets to the CTE building, the shop, definitely inadequate for the programs they're offering there. That's a continued challenge. There's also, with the layout of the school, the same issue with LPO. There's no fencing, and going from building to building from a campus security standpoint, it's not the best not the best situation. There's a portable classroom that's in poor condition, recommended to be taken out of service.
That's the one that's connected to the CTE building.
It's behind it. I
Yeah.
think they call it the annex.
Right.
There's a picture of it right here.
ADA on campus has a lot of issues, even little things about probably the sink height in the bathroom, the
Right.
slopes in the parking lot, the space, next to the ADA, the handicap spot in the parking lot. Throughout the building, there's a lot of that. The field house, out at the field was recommended to be replaced. The old building out in front is not approved for occupancy. It's being used as storage. That's kind of something that at some point will need to be figured out, what to do with that piece of the building. Lockers and other fixtures could use updating. And then the site security I went over. Some other things that we have done there, I don't know if it's been since this report, but Mr. Kemick did get a grant for updating the intercom system, so that's one of I think the first school that got the latest and greatest intercom system. There's a nice
That's
intercom
right.
system. The school also funded a really nice, or maybe it was boosters, really nice sound system in the gym. The camera system's been updated. Last year we updated the heating ventilation controls because those were outdated, and they use a computer or internet protocols that our network or our technology department doesn't like. The front doors have been, the hardware's been updated. That's a pretty good overview of Clark Fork. So if you'd like, I can continue on and go through LPO tonight.
Unless
Sure.
there's specific questions for Clarkville?
Nope, I think we are okay. Yeah, so continue on, that would be great.
Okay,
LPO.
so LPO, the Connery High School, same time frame, 2018 report. That building's originally constructed, I believe, 1909,
Yeah,
and portable classrooms, 4 portables that are 7 classroom spaces, or 7 spaces, and then a gym, which is really a pole barn shop. It's not really a building you would normally construct for a public education facility. Maybe for a storage, but not normally a gym. But it's safe and it does function, and I think it's what the district could afford at the time. This, like Clark Fork, has real issues with coming and going between the different pieces. It's also major ADA issues. It's a 2-story building, no elevator.
yeah.
And all throughout there would definitely be ADA issues, from the parking lot to the bathroom to the classrooms that you can't access. The roof on the main building, we went through and fixed any leaking that was going on, but the surfacing is gone, so it's lost its protection from corrosion. And the sheeting under the metal roof is skip sheeting, so meaning it's not a solid sheet of plywood under the metal, it's strips of wood. So when you're up there, it's not sturdy. So the last time we had a roofing contractor there, they said they wouldn't come back. So we do the repairs ourselves with proper tie-offs and safety gear. Our staff get up there, and we were up there last year and replaced all the screws that were failing. So the building really doesn't function well for its intended use. Hard to secure, ventilation, no fresh air in the main building. It's a residential heating and air conditioning system. It does have air conditioning. Parts.
Spotty.
Just one part.
Oh.
Okay.
The main office.
Your office?
I didn't do it.
No, the rest of the building does have air conditioning, most of the portables do too. I'm not saying it functions perfectly, because it's antiquated and definitely needs to be replaced. We do have projects scheduled for this summer to replace the siding on one of the portables, because it's just really deteriorating and falling apart. That's all I have on LPO. This
Wow.
building was recommended for
Right.
total replacement.
Yeah, we looked at two old schools here from you today.
Yeah. Clarkfork needs work, but not total replacement. LPO was recommended for total replacement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Are there any questions?
No, again, I thank you, Matt, for these reports. I think
Yeah.
it's important that we continue to look at this and that we don't just forget about
Yeah.
the state of our facilities and also the update of your team and how well you, what you have, older facilities, but your team is always there doing the repairs. And hopefully, in the next 2 weeks, we won't have another steam leak that you're going to get reported to about at San
Hopefully
Juan
we
Middle
can shut off
School.
the
So-
boilers before too long.
Right, there we go.
Yeah.
So,
Save us
but
from all-
anyway, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, I think it's helpful that we have these kind of ongoing updates so that we don't feel so caught off guard when we get a report. Thank you, Matt. And at this time, I'm going to invite Dr. Jansen to come up, and together with Superintendent Tom Albertson, you guys are going to give us an update on mental health support.
Do you want me to,
Me to start?
do you want to pull your slides up or?
I have it. I was
Okay.
able to finally get online.
Okay.
Let's see if it will share.
Okay.
And while we're pulling this up, board member Supiker called me, I don't know, probably a month ago, and basically just said, as a board member, he would like to have a review of our mental health team and the mental health support that we provide in our school district. And I said, great idea. I invited Joy then to come and present to you of what we provide. And I will kind of jump in at points in time. And again, this is going to look like a 10,000-foot view, with time for you to ask specific questions. And so I think Dr. Jansen's going to start with what we provide students, and then I can talk a little more about employees.
Right. And I think
So-
the point is for an overview. I know we won't be able to dial deep into all of the details, but it'll give us an overview of what's happening.
Just sort of
So-
a brief.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So, it was about 5 years ago. This model started with Sean Woodward, superintendent. It was a discussion of how do we support our student needs, seeing an increase in the needs of social and emotional, and also I'll say sort of the therapeutic realm as well. And what I proposed to Sean and we adopted as a district is this comprehensive school-based wellness model, which is a model that is just not unique to LPOSD, but is a model that you see across Idaho as well as across the nation. And it looks very simple, but it is, there are many facets of it, but within just sort of a brief framework, we have our general social emotional learning. So those are our elementary school counselors. We have 3 of them. We will be hiring one, we will have a 4th next year. So those will be within our elementary schools doing our 2nd step curriculum. Within our 6th grades, we, because the 2nd step students weren't really engaging with and is a middle school curriculum, more of that, we use Y-Try, we use CAS, we use some other. At the secondary level, you really see the sources of strength that have come in and sort of for all of the students. And all of our schools participate in that with just unique student population. They have not moved to sources of strength, but in working with Deb and Jeff, they have created something like sources of strength within the LPO. Then we move up, so that's more of what we call as our tier 1, sort of all students get it.
From that, the students are then identified into our tier 2, and that's where they receive group or individual counseling. And within this tier, this is where our school counselors, our school counselors and our school psychologists work together. And so school psychologists, under their purview of training, can actually do counseling as well. So this is where one of the reasons why we added another school psychologist to extend that framework, so we'd be able to do more of that individual counseling in the group. So the school counselors at the secondary level do a lot of the individual counseling, as well as around the credit piece. And the groups we see more on the elementary level, and those groups are done by the elementary school counselors, and they extend the second step curriculum. And then our top tier, tier 3, is our relationship with Kinnicksu Health Services. We've had a partnership with them for now 5 years with our school behavioral health clinic. This year, unfortunately, we did not have an elementary school therapist, just because we have a provider shortage in Sandpoint in Bonner County. And this, however, at this point, Kevin has found us a therapist for next year. The previous years, we've had students at the elementary level, 35 students were served by this therapist. And we have one at the secondary level, Stacy Luce. She's been there with us for 2 years. That is a relationship with Kinnicksu Health Services. We just have an MOA with them, and there is no exchange of money. So Kinnicksu Health Services is considered a community health center, and under a community self-health center umbrella, they're able to come into the public school and bill Medicaid. And so they do that through our partnership that we have. We also have a partnership with them that they also provide us one of our elementary school counselors. So they are a big piece of our comprehensive wellness model that we have at the Lake Conroe School.
So Joy, before you move from this slide, I guess I would just like to add the importance of tier 1 in that, does every student have a trusted adult? And you know the connection that the classroom teacher has at the elementary level, that student is so connected there. But and at the secondary level, when we talk about social emotional learning, it's, does a student feel, do they belong? Do they have that trusted adult? And that's the importance of our activities and our field trips and our electives and the whole comprehensive part of our education. So when people want to say, hey, let's increase funding for social emotional learning, here's a program that you can buy, I'm more of a proponent in this tier 1 is let's invest in activities, let's invest in experiences, let's invest in our personnel that make those connections with kids. So to me, that is key in that. And and I think, Joy, I don't know if you'll get to it in the next slide, but that we are kind of at a crisis point in our community in the lack of therapists and counselors for individual students that seek it outside of school. There's a waiting list. They can't. There's just not enough.
Right.
And so that is something that we are concerned about, and makes that relationship that we have with Kinnicksu Health Services even more important, that those students and families can get that help within. It's still not enough. I'm just here to tell you that. We want to be proud of what we're doing, but it's still not enough. So.
And to add to that, Tom, I'd like to share a word is that we have been recognized in the state of Idaho for our work with the community, and I'll talk about this in a second. I sit on a couple state boards, and through that, we've had one of them is the Interagency Governance Board for the YES program, which is through the Department of Health and Welfare, which is the mental health program that the state has set up. And so that is something that we have heavily communicated, that there is a provider shortage, and it is a big deal in this community. So The other thing that I wanted to share with the board is that I also do a very close relationship with our JDC, Juvenile Detention Center. It is part over my purview because by law we must have a special educator within the school that we have there for Bonner County. Also serves Boundary County and parts of Montana. So my colleagues, Diane Heller and I, were having conversations, and we've had a conversation about a year and a half, and it's, we'd attend many meetings together, and we would just see this disconnect in the community. And we would hear that one behavioral health organization are doing these great groups, and another one is doing this, or somebody's doing this, or somebody's holding that training. And we just finally said one day, it's like, we need to have a Bonner County group. So we named it Bonner County Youth Mental Health Collaborative. We've been meeting for 2 years. We meet once a month. What has come out of this, these are our typical members each month. So we have a huge representation. We even have the juvenile judges attend monthly. We have our major community behavioral health organizations. We have the school districts, Department of Health and Welfare, Optum, Head Start, Early Head Start, Idaho Lives Project. We have all these representations, and it's been a beautiful thing. What's come out of this is we have parent trainings, so everybody knows what parent trainings are happening, and we're able to disperse that information. We've had trainings, on the CANS, which was provided by North Idaho Children's Mental Health, Jill Hicks. Through that training, not only did it go out to the community, but our school counselors and school psychologists were also offered that training. So the other thing that's come out of this is grants. We've brought in speakers for the community. Most of it's been virtual because of the situation that we've been in. But in the previous year, we actually brought in speakers that actually came to Sandpoint. So it's been a huge benefit to the community, and it allows us all to be on the same page in what we're doing for our kids and our students. So, do you guys have any questions about this? And there's just to remember that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so to speak to Tom's point about connection, we know it takes one individual to make a difference in a child's life and change the trajectory forever.
And to add to this, for our employees, we have it's called EAP, Employee Assistance Program, where any employee has 6 free counseling sessions available to them. And so when our employee is at any point in time through our HR department can access that assistance themselves and get connected with a counselor in time of need. So
That's good to know.
that's another benefit.
Yeah.
So hopefully that kind of answers the overview of where we are with our mental health team. And really, to be honest with you, it's not a separate entity. Every employee is part of our mental health team.
Right.
So
They're all the trusted connection for those students.
it is.
Yeah.
So what are some of the typical or most common problems, services that you render to elementary, middle school, and high school age students?
So, are you asking like the mental health pieces that we're seeing?
Yeah, from a mental health viewpoint.
Yeah. I would say, I know John, you're here. You guys, we got some elementary school principals in here. So, what I can share for a lot of our students right now, particularly with COVID coming back, what we see with our first graders and our second graders is that when we even think about social emotional skills is how to problem solve, how to be a student. And they didn't get that instruction because they weren't in school. Some of our more significant, we have students that have anxiety, that are diagnosed with depression. We serve students in our district that are diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so it's really on an individual basis on how we're serving them. The part of the framework that really has made a difference, I believe, in the district is that our relationship with Kinixu, because We can serve students to a certain point, but then there's a point when the social emotional issues become more of a clinical element, and that's where we're able to refer to Connexu. And we do refer out, it's just not Connexu, but being able to have that service come into our school district, come into the schools, to be able to see the student within the school day has been absolutely a game changer for us. Because when I first came to the district, and I've been here 8 years, something that was very evident, and we would make recommendation to seek outside counseling, outside therapy, and it wasn't happening. Parents couldn't get there for various reasons, or didn't have gas money, and it was evident to me that at some point, if we were really going to make a difference, and this is happening, there is a movement now across the state to actually bring that service to the school. And we started our pilot actually out at Southside, and it was a huge success. And then we moved it to Sago. So Sago and Sandpoint, Southside were our pilot, absolutely success. And then we bridged it out to the remainder. With the huge elementary success that we had, we moved it to the secondary level. And so that has been a game changer for us as well.
And again, Gary, I always like to say that schools are a microcosm of our community. So if you can think of any stressors that there are in our community, those are the same stressors that are on our students. So
Yeah.
if you've got poverty, but anything that
Any
even short term, through COVID, if you think about the stressors that it's put on some family units,
Yes.
those stressors are going to equate to the students also.
Right.
All the importance why, from our food service program to our, feeding the kids, keeping our kids in a safe environment, with Matt's team, to our teaching and learning team. I mean, it's all part of it, because what we know is for some of our students, being at school is right now, maybe it's short term, maybe it's long term, is the very best part of their day. I mean, they're getting fed, there's warm, and they get a nurturing environment, and they know somebody cares about them. I mean, so I really can't say much more than that. And then, as you saw, we do have the resources for those extenuating circumstances when there are just these needs that go beyond what we can provide at school.
Right.
So I want to, again, thank Joy for her part in that.
I've got a question. I'm assuming that part of what we do is try to help educate students to recognize when somebody's in crisis. Like, I know we've got a baseline, we teach everybody these baseline things, but, the elephant in the room is kids that are in middle school and high school that are contemplating suicide. And we have to be able to identify and get help, and especially young men, they don't think further than 10 minutes out in front. And when somebody's in that situation, can we help them? Can we get them the help that they need? And it's tragic.
And I would say that's at elementary level too.
Yeah.
I know that, is it 3 years ago, 4 years ago, sorry about my timeline, that Washington actually did something, had sort of a campaign at their school. And it was a peer who connected out to a peer who actually had suicide ideation, and that peer said it was because of that peer that I didn't do what I wanted to do.
Which
So
Yeah, and there's state statute around that we do a training with our staff at the beginning of every year. And I don't know, Geraldine, not to put you on the spot, is there anything you would like to add as far as the training that we do for students?
Sure. So it has grown, and I think one of the neat things that we've been able to see, I've been in high school, 10-ish years. When we had unfortunately some suicides in our high school, it was very quiet, and it wasn't at the forefront. And I think one of the things, our push with Sources of Strength, our mentoring program, our community's willingness to talk about it, it has really, it comes to the forefront. I think probably every other week we are calling home with it. We've done great work in our district as far as getting some kind of all of us using the same sort of form, like what are our steps, just some real things that have helped. And I think the Sources of Strength has been tremendous to us as far as really helping us all speak a common language when we talk about
Right.
the trusted adult. So often teachers, you know, they've come to us for training. They did a training last year for the counselors that Joy organized for all the school psychs and the counselors. And then we were able to do that. We brought it to Sandpoint High School, and I know that, you know, so I think there's a thing kind of getting everybody on board, and it is not gone away.
Yeah.
You know, Gary asked what it is. I do a lot of the post-secondary, and today I worked with a student who had huge family issues. I worked with a student who just academic pressure and life pressure fell apart. And I worked with a student who has, you know, no income, no food, nothing. And I worked with a student who is so depressed and anxious they can't even function. And that's really not what I'm not that. I usually don't do all of that.
Right.
The other piece, I agree totally, John, is that we know in Sandpoint is a resort town. It is a destination location. And when you look at trauma-informed practices, trauma has no distinction between socioeconomic lines. And one of the largest variables they see is neglect. And that is from one spectrum, from poverty all the way to high income, is they're seeing neglect. And neglect has a very significant impact on our students, that then you see the comorbidities that, you know, Geraldine's talking about and we see in our students. And Tom is absolutely correct. You know, we call it in our trauma-informed practices felt safety. Our students come to school week and they not only
Right.
feel safe physically, but they feel emotionally safe. And I know Tom has talked about intelligent, you know, being safe in the intelligent realm as well, being able to share, being able to connect. And I think that is where we've also, as a district, from the beginning, particularly this year, is to, you know, really reconnecting with our students coming back from COVID and really being on point with those social emotional pieces and, you know, making sure everybody's doing okay. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the overview that you brought to us, because it's a timely reminder.
And
It's
I would
very
just
much.
say, for future meetings, you know, we're always, there are individual specific programs, you know, you've heard about sources of strength, why try.
Yeah.
We could have more presentations on specific
That
things
dials in on
that
it.
are of interest to the board, so
Okay.
please keep that
That's
in mind.
very helpful.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Joy.
you. We have a report, financial overview from our Chief Financial Officer, Lisa Halls. Hello, Lisa.
Good evening.
Yes.
I have to say that I saw you come in when she was speaking, and that was the quietest
Oh,
cowboy boot walk I've ever seen.
Cowboy tiptoe.
It was like,
Thank you.
yeah. Thank you. It's coming up. Okay. So Kelly's going to be super helpful and go through my slides. So we'll wait for.
She is super helpful, by the way. Thank you. Look.
No, I better be able to
Fisher.
get it up. Ever show me? I think it's this laptop. If I hit escape. Let's try this. Where's that?
I know, but we have to do it before we have to go to settings.
There's a lot of red on mine.
my red.
Oh, did I give you?
You
my-
moved ahead.
Oh, no.
He's way back on page 6. He jumped ahead.
Where play display.
Yeah,
Five,
so I put it
5 and
on
6.
my old English
Apple
Bible
TV.
TV.
Here we go.
Go.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is going to be brief because there's actually so much content that I just had to deliver this at a very high level. And the title of this is important, Budget Overview for Fiscal Year 2022, which starts July 1st, 2021, and federal ESSER funding. And the reason why we can't discuss fiscal year 22's prospective budget for the school district without concurrently discussing the federal COVID relief funding packages, and there are three, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3, as you'll see as this presentation unfolds. And I'm not going to repeat the content that I delivered to the board in January on ESSER 2 and in March on ESSER 3. And for those that are interested, of course, our board meetings are recorded and given our time considerations. So next slide, please. This year, I would say at this late stage of April 27th, the known variables are far less than in any other budget cycle that I've been involved in my public career, be it with the city, with a community college, or with the school district. So that spans more than 30 years. So the things that are known right now for next fiscal cycle is in November of 2019, we passed an indefinite term supplemental levy. It represents about 35% of our current budget, and it will go, the current levy, and then the indefinite term goes into effect for its first year of an indefinite term on July 1st, 2021, and it's a fixed amount of $12,700,000.
Yep.
We also know that our health insurance represents about 10% of our operational budget, and we have received our health insurance renewal. It's considerably lower than first indicators, where we thought it would be around 9%. It's 2.77%. We also have negotiations in the state of Idaho for teachers, and the teams on both respective sides finished their work April 20th, and they will bring as an action item to the board on May 11th the negotiated agreement. We also know that there is a temporary rule in place for funding public schools in Idaho on enrollment-based funding from the state board that expires when the legislature adjourns, and it will revert to paying school districts on average daily attendance.
Lisa, not to interrupt you, but what if the legislature doesn't adjourn?
Right. So no, our superintendent is not being flip, and I actually am going to cover that.
Sounds like it, but he's not. Okay.
And as the presentation continues.
Okay.
So it's a good question.
Okay. Thank you.
We also have not received our federal grant estimates. And by that, I mean our Title I, our Title II, our special education grant programs. And normally by late April, we actually have received those. The federal fiscal cycle is not concurrent with our fiscal cycle. It starts October 1st, so they are always estimates until generally very late September. And then maybe the most important part about this presentation is that ESSER funding is complicated, and I'll elaborate. Next slide.
Understatement.
Okay, now to the unknown variables as of this past Sunday. So we are right now in the third longest Idaho legislative session in history. And we knew from the outset, in January, I said to the board, well, probably one of the main focuses is going to be on trying to attempt to limit executive power. And that has played out throughout the session and continues to do so continues to be a main focus. And our public comment speaker addressed another issue. It seems that very late in the session there seems to be a new zeitgeist, and our House members, or is it just that our House members are speaking very loudly, but the session now has been mired in a debate over critical race theory, and it has stalled all of the public education budgets. There has been a bill that is now on the governor's desk, House Bill 377, which is essentially some kind of compromise bill, a non-discrimination bill. Our state senator, who sits not only on JFAC but also Senate Ed, personally called our superintendent to express yesterday, when they were voting on it in Senate Ed, that he knows that, you know, this is not an issue in Lake Pend Oreille School District, and just want the audience to hear that. So JFAC, which hears all the agency budgets, on March 12th, made their recommendation for fiscal year 22's K-12 budget. And because of our governor's 5% holdback on the current fiscal year 21, fiscal year 21 is also still not appropriated. And that passed the Senate floor, and then it came to the House floor just shy of 2 weeks ago, and it was defeated because this critical race theory piece, I think it was the longest, I think I read that it was the longest floor debate in Idaho's on any given bill. And now, 45 days later, right, April 27th, JFAC again this morning heard a revised, only slightly, by $1 million for K-12 of a $2.1 billion budget. Not only the fiscal year 22 appropriation, but also the fiscal year 21 appropriation. And the part that has not been appropriated, there are different portions of the appropriation, and this was the teacher portion, which is $1,884,000,000. So half of the annual appropriation for K-12, and because we are the largest agency budget, almost 50% of the state general fund budget, literally this piece is 25% of the state's annual general budget. So now the process will start again. It needs to go to the House and the Senate floors and to the governor before the dollars are appropriated. Other things that are still working through the legislature, the governor opened with his State of the State that he wanted to have a sweeping change to our state income tax brackets. And bills have been introduced. The latest bill as of last Friday is House Bill 380, and there are some one-time changes and then some ongoing changes, but blended together there are almost $400 million. And income tax is the state's largest revenue source, so we are the largest annual agency budget, and anything that happens with this piece going forward is going to impact appropriations for K-12.
Mm-hmm.
Also in JFAC this morning, let's see, how do I talk about this? Also in JFAC this morning, part of ESSER 3, these are the dollars, ARPA dollars, which were appropriated by the federal government in March of 2021, had a piece for IDEA funding that's pending. It's JFAC approved that. It's meant to be in a one-year enhancement program, and there was intent language specifically saying that it's one-time in nature. And then there are other things that JFAC still has not ruled on. How ESSER 2 funds will be distributed to school districts. As it stands now, half would be appropriated in this current fiscal cycle and half in fiscal year 22. Still, there is a lack of agreement from the superintendent year bearer's office to the legislature, to the governor on ESSER 3, and by that I mean when they would appropriate it, or if they would appropriate it, and who has the power to appropriate it in the state of Idaho.
Mhm.
You remember when I said it's complicated? The ESSER funds is very complicated. Our superintendent asked, well, what about if the legislature does not adjourn? So the temporary rules language is that K-12 will be paced on and funded on enrollment until the legislature adjourns. And the legislature must adopt a budget. Next slide, please.
Enough said.
So, federal ESSER funding, it's one time, but it spans over multiple fiscal years. Started in fiscal year 21. There are 3 different ESSER packages. And in all 3 ESSER packages, supplanting is permitted. This is the first time that I've worked with a federal grant where supplanting is permitted. So what does that mean? Federal grants, with the exception of ESSER that I've dealt with in K-12, are meant to supplement their services in addition. Supplanting means current expenses, if they meet one or more of the 15 criteria that are allowable in ESSER, can be expended out of these federal ESSER dollars. We have expended all of our ESSER 1 dollars as of our April 2021 payroll, and we will begin to expend our ESSER 2 dollars once it's appropriated May 1st of 2021. And in the ESSER 1 dollars, to give you some flavor of what's being paid out of there, there have been the equivalent of 19.25 FTE teachers and 6.2 FTE classified positions, but many positions are just portions of a staff person's time. It's actually 32 staff people, and we expect with ESSER 2 in fiscal year 22 to add potentially another 17 FTE. When I say ESSER is complicated, it's complicated on the political side, what's going on in the political arena in Idaho. But it's also complicated in that it carries a lot of other federal financial mandates. So the first of these is called the maintenance of effort for our IDEA grants, which are about $700,000 annually. And this has been in place, and we've had to meet this maintenance of effort. And what it says is that you must, from one fiscal cycle to the next, spend at least or more on a per pupil basis for your special ed population, the same dollar amount out of your state and local funds. And that dollar amount right now on paper is about $7,000 per pupil. We, as a school district, have had a supplemental levy in place, local funds only. We, as a school district, have elected to always budget and track and be audited and keep that supplemental levy separate. Very strategically, I've never put any of the special ed programs in the supplemental levy. And now we are going to capitalize on an option, and we will be the only school district in the state to do so next year, and maybe more will start doing this because of what's happening with ESSER. You can elect to meet the maintenance of effort for IDEA on state and local, or just local, and we're going to go to just local. So the per pupil amount in electing just local drops from, say, $7,000 to about $200. So what it's going to give us is the ability of about $3 million for those qualifying expenses that can go into ESSER. And there are many of the FTEs that I've mentioned on the mental health side and on the learning loss side can be moved into, so current expenses, no change to the program, it's just where the dollars are going to be paid out of. Mm-hmm. This is huge for Lake Pend School District. Mm-hmm. And so much so that the State Department, a district hasn't done this and they had to go to the feds and review all of our audits and because we have an indefinite term levy, the feds are comfortable that we have an ongoing local source. Then something number 2 is a different maintenance of effort, and this is related to title programs, Title I most particularly. And it says that you must, in your state and local funds, from one fiscal year to the next, expend at least 90% compared to the prior year out of your general fund. So that doesn't sound very complicated, except now when you have this infusion of ESSER funds and you are moving out of your general fund millions of dollars into your ESSER funds, you get close to your 90% threshold. And anything that doesn't meet that threshold, you will forfeit percentage-wise in dollar for all of your title appropriations. Mm-hmm. Also related to the title programs is something called comparability. And it says for non-Title I schools, comparing to Title I schools, you must staff in like size schools the same FTE of teachers and parapros in the classroom staffing. And if you don't meet that comparability, you forfeit your Title I funding. Title I funding for us, $800,000. So again, if you're moving staff out of your general fund into ESSER, the balancing of, and with the justification, it gets complicated. Also, with the state of Idaho's foundation formula, and the largest portion of that, which is called salary-based apportionment, there is something called use it or lose it. And this has never been an issue for our school district because we've always staffed more teachers than the funding formula generates for us. Right. But now that we're going to be moving primarily teaching staff into the ESSER funds, if you drop, you can fund up to, you can have FTE teaching staff up to 90.5% and still receive 100% of the funding. As soon as you drop below that, you forfeit the state funding.
You forfeit the state funding that you're not accessing, or the whole thing?
that you're
Just
not
the-
actually,
right.
that you're not,
The 10%.
whatever you dropped below the 90.5%. And
You-
so,
right.
you know, between these, we're going to have close to 40 FTE teachers in some capacity that are going to be in ESSER funding. And,
Right.
And then,
So Lisa, does that put us below the 90.5%?
we will be, you know,
Right
of course
at
I
the
won't let us do that.
Right.
But we're getting
Wanted to-
very, very close.
It means she has to watch every single
Right.
thing.
Watching it very
It's-
close.
And so when you're mixing all of these different, either federal or state requirements
Right.
or nuances of the funding formula, the ESSER infusion of funding makes things complicated.
Mhm.
And then you must, with ESSER 1, spend all of ESSER 1 before you can start accessing ESSER 2. But you can spend ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 money at the same time because ESSER 3 has a mandate to set aside and spend 20% on learning loss. And you can start
Oh, right.
accessing that learning loss in ESSER 3. Next slide, please. This is a very high-level presentation of from what we adopted as a budget in June of 2020 to the changes that we are proposing for our fiscal year 22 budget. So we had planned fully a year ago and budgeted a deferral from not only fiscal year 20 but to fiscal year 21 because we built our levy on a levy rate. We knew we were not going to be expending some dollars, and also there was a hiatus on what's called the sick leave benefit from person. So that's revenue, positive number here, $705,000. Although the state has not appropriated fiscal year 22's money, I'm estimating that's an additional $326,000. I shared with you before for the preceding 6 fiscal cycles, that number's hovered around $1 million to $1.2 million, so a significant drop in appropriation.
Right.
Sort of the plug number here is we are going to be using ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 money to balance our budget for fiscal year 22, $1,700,000. But there will be other ESSER funds that we will spend in fiscal year 22, most notably on capital items.
Mhm.
We, at the beginning of this year, deployed additional primarily teaching staff, and then we also reduced some teachers' periods or programs, and the net effect of keeping all of those positions in place, which we are recommending, is a cost of $56,000. I'm just going to hit only the highlights here. Then the program changes I'm going to go into on the next slide. And then finally, pending the board's review of what has been negotiated by the negotiating teams for the teachers, if you are increasing all of the salary matrices in the district, that would cost about $1.2 million, pointing out that when the state appropriates fiscal year 22, the salary increases for classified and administrators at the state level is 2%, and for the teaching, it's 5%, and this figure would be less than that. Next slide, please. All right, so what are going to be significant changes for fiscal year 22 compared to what was adopted in June of 2020 for fiscal year 21? From a technology standpoint, there's basically zero change. We are, however, going to be moving our Chromebook purchases into ESSER dollars. For transportation, we're going to be buying 2 additional buses, which you you approved at the last board meeting, again out of ESSER dollars, but there are some shavings in estimated fuel and some other things. For facilities, we are going to continue next year to have 3 roving custodians for heightened COVID-related cleaning, and there are some reductions in utilities. For child nutrition, the federal government, I think it's now a week and a half ago, announced that they will continue for all of next school year, all of fiscal year 22, to offer the summer meal program nationwide. And it will not cost students to eat, irrespective of your income. But we can bill the federal government for meals served, and the reimbursement level is higher than the non summer meals program, and that could actually generate, instead of having to transfer about $200,000 to make our child nutrition fund whole, it may be self-sustaining, so it actually could recognize some considerable revenue there. Our special ed director mentioned we'll be adding an elementary counselor, and then in the teaching and learning component, we will be adding year 1 of a prospective 2-year math adoption, $200,000 estimated cost per year, mentioning that also we'll be continuing to adopt science, so 2 very large curriculums being adopted concurrently. We've added a secondary assistant teaching and learning and title administrative position, bringing the title out of an elementary school and into the central office and administrative support. We will also continue our full-day kindergarten with no tuition, and we will be adding additional parapro elementary support. And then there are some changes to student activities. Probably the biggest cost is the cost for fees for the city of Sandpoint. Next slide, please. All right, this is, you can't read this, but this is, I wanted to end that where I began on the ESSER funding. I hope I've been able to share with you is complicated. Our budget strategy is to use the funds as they are allowed and federally mandated, and help to build up over the next several fiscal cycles our general fund balance. And I also want to make sure that the board understands that this does not in any way mean or preclude budget cuts in the forthcoming fiscal years. If we're trying to treat fiscal year 22 as, what's the right word, Tom? Continuation of the services we've put in place, and a slight embellishment because we're not out of the pandemic yet. And then at the bottom, this just shows what our ESSER dollars were. Again, $569,000 is spent. That's ESSER 1. $2.6 million, that's ESSER 2. We'll spend about $500,000 of that this fiscal year, and the lion's share of that next year. And then ESSER 3, we've decided as a district to set aside 20% of that for the allowable capital costs for related to HVAC, and that's $1.1 million. There's a 20% mandate for learning loss, another $1.1 million, and then the remaining is the allowable expenses under ESSER 1 and 2 and 3. And the biggest piece that sort of hasn't been mapped out as a school district presently is this 20% learning loss, where we're going to have to write a plan and submit that just as the state does to the federal government.
Yeah.
The next steps would be that because we are required to notify the county by April 30th of our budget hearing date, and because it's non-negotiable, if you give them one date and it changes, in this case, we would forfeit all of our ability to levy our indefinite term levy, because the hearing date goes on the tax bills. and because the legislature has not finished its work, and because we have to adopt our budget before June 30th, it will be held, the adoption hearing will be held the second meeting in June, which is June 22nd. Are there any other questions?
So the total ESSER funding potential, around $9 million,
Affirmative.
spread out over how many years?
That's a good question, because one, you can have a tidings period, which extends it by a year. You don't have to ask the federal government for that. And then you can ask for a tidings amendment. So right now, this one expires, and this is complicated because the way the federal bills were originally written, some had the tidings period in there and some didn't. But this expires September 30th, 2023. But again, you have to spend it all before you can start accessing ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. This, with the tidings period, expires September 30th, 2024. This expires with the tidings period September 30th, 2024. But when superintendent on March 12th reported to JFAC, she indicated this would expire September 30th, 2025. And that, of course, was completely different than anybody else in the state had heard until that very moment. And she still has not committed if she will ask for a tidings period amendment waiver that would extend this to September 30th of 2025. For us out here, of course, this has everything to do with how we plan.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already spent about $600,000 of these monies.
Correct.
And we've got 2 school years, possibly 3, to spend the rest of it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
If it gets
Okay.
appropriated.
Well, I know that is a complicated topic, and what was supposed to be high level felt very detailed, even though I know it was high level. Are there any other questions for Lisa?
I have one, just a very basic question, and that is, all this federal funding, how is that, do we think, is gonna affect the state funding we get? Is
Yeah,
that,
so-
how is that gonna tie in?
Right, so there are, in order for the state to accept the ESSER funds, they too, I talked about 2 different types of maintenance of effort. They too have what's called a maintenance of equity, which means they are committing that by accepting the ESSER funds, they cannot drop the K-12 state appropriation by more than 3% from one fiscal year to the next.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, you're
Thank you very much. Very detailed. Very complicated, I should say. This time I'll hear a motion for our consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And we have a board discussion about the school zone equalization. I will hand that over to you. We have an agreement to
Sure.
look at here.
Right. So, and I may ask Kelly to step in here. She's got more experience than I, but with the 2020 census, we are obligated to look at our trustee zones and realign them so that there's equal population in each of those zones. And we've used a company before.
So the contract that was in your board packet and Chair Lewis has in front of her to sign if you approve it, is to use Quadrant Consulting. They did our same consulting 10 years ago, or now a little over 10 years ago, when we did our trustee zone equalization then. This service is being provided through ISBA. I was not with the district as the clerk 10 years ago, so I can't speak to that fact if we used ISBA or not, but we did use Quadrant Consulting. They were our consultant.
and we have to have this done, I believe it's 120 days after the census data has been released.
Right.
But if we hired the consulting firm, then it would be their
There's a-
responsibility
yes.
to make that timeline.
And as you saw in the packet, there's a discount in cost if we have an agreed contract, but before June 1st.
Before the census is released.
Right, which is in our best interest to agree to. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to look through this agreement. It's not a complicated one. Are there any questions and comments about that? You're asking for a motion to
Yes.
approve.
I make a motion to approve the agreement for the school zone equalization through ISBA.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
I heard an aye everywhere, so I didn't say any opposed. So that agreement we will sign and then pass on to ISBA. Thank you. The second item for board discussion is the COVID-19 update.
Yeah,
Oh, it's already on the board.
just real quick, here's Lake Pend Oreille School District's data. You can see right now that we have 3. Principal Penrose did talk about some of the students at LPO that did need to stay home. So there were 2 confirmed cases within that population, and then 1 at Washington Elementary. So we were at 3. And if we do look at where we are on we're at 5% here on our testing positivity rate with Bonner County, and you can see then this is where we are at our 7-day average per 100,000 people is at 6.9, but again, you can see that we're still trending fairly low in that spot. So really, that's a very quick report, just to keep you apprised of what's going on in the district and what's going on in the county.
Thank you. Thank you. We will move on to discussion of sale of real property. I'm gonna
If I could just say.
hand it back over.
Yeah, so it is an action item, but I just wanted to let the board know that where we are tonight is that you can make a motion to table a decision. You could make if you want to, if there is a motion to move forward, that basically the motion would be is that we would be moving forward in hiring an appraiser. That would be the first step. Or there could be a motion that you are not inclined to move forward. Doesn't mean you couldn't move forward in future meetings. So just wanted to lay those options out there. Sometimes when things get put on a action item that there's a quick movement there. But anyway, but I will leave you to your discussion on that.
So, yeah, and it is open for discussion here among the trustees, and I think Lonnie has.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up done a little bit more digging, met with property owners, gotten another side of the story of what has taken place, and discussed a few different things there with the property owners. This is a situation where, again, I'm disappointed that the city has pushed this on us. It's a situation that was, from what I can tell, unintentional. We're in this position where these folks built their house, it's a beautiful home. Now they are faced with a situation where the city's wanting them to tear apart part of their new home. One of the things that was really, there's 2 really important things for this for me. One, there's 2 different things the city looks at, and that is the footprint coverage of the home, and then also the impervious surface footprint of the lot. Now they are over on the allotted footprint for the home. That is at 35%. They're over that. However, they are well below the impervious surface coverage of the lot, which aggravates me because the whole intention of this ordinance in the city is that we don't pave over paradise, right? The groundwater needs to be absorbed. They are well within the limits on that. And that was not even a topic of discussion for what we got from the city, from what I can see.
True.
The other part that's really important that we need to consider is if we were to move forward and sell off a portion of that farthest south lot, it would not impede the school's ability to, at a future date, if that was the decision made, that we could sell those lots. Now, obviously, I don't see that ever happening, but
You mean by size?
yeah. So the
We would
minimum
be
lot
limited.
size in the city is 5,000 square feet. That is a minimum buildable lot size, and I put an asterisk behind that because there are exceptions to that rule. If we were to sell 40 inches, which was the original number from the city, that then got amended to 7.5 feet, either of those numbers, we would not lose too much of that lot to make it an unbuildable lot. So that's important. Again, I don't ever see the city or the school district wanting to sell those, but it is something that we have to consider. The other thing that was discussed is the use of that strip of land. And I know we've spoken about it in the past, but the landowners are very open to the fact that they don't intend to use that piece of property if we were to sell it to them. They intend to leave that in the school's hands in terms of use. So even if they were to put up a fence, the fence would be where the current lot line sits, and if we were to sell 40 inches or 7.5 feet, they would grant an easement to the school to use that property. So those are important topics. It's a bad situation. I don't feel that the city has done them a service or us a service, because we are in a partnership with the city, and we are in a partnership with community schools, and to put us against each other is inappropriate.
Right. Go ahead, Trustee Sue.
I also met with the landowners, toured the property, had an in-depth discussion with them. I echo everything Lonnie has said. I don't think that this is malicious. I don't think they intended, to overbuild their property.
Agreed.
I agree that this is the city's problem, but unfortunately, they can't resolve it, so it's us. Even the city is inconsistent here. There's a number of properties right in this block that exceed this coverage limit. If this property, the requirements aren't even the same block to block in that South Sandpoint neighborhood. If this house was located one block further north, it would be a different, it would be 40% instead of 35, and they would be within the guideline. The neighbors of the property, admire the house and support the application for the variance with the city. I also echoed the landowner said if they were able, first of all, they're not asking for 7.5 feet. They feel that they can resolve their issue with the city with their original request, which was I think 40 inches, 3.5 feet, or 42 inches. Second, they don't intend to fence that 40-inch strip and to leave it open for the use of the playground or the public. I sympathize with their position, and I would support their petition.
I think that I empathize with the situation. It has not been, it just seems like every time there's a discussion about it, there's some other strange element on the city's behalf that's frustrating. One thing that I want to mention, though, is that the goodwill of of the Levi and Neil is not in question here.
Right.
But what happens to the sale of that property to the next owner? They have no obligation to uphold a,
No, that's not.
Well, they-
Sorry, that's, if they
okay,
were.
wait, yeah, so clarify for me
Okay,
on that.
so,
If there's a
let's-
easement granted
Right,
to the
that-
school to use,
that easement would become appurtenant, meaning it runs with the land. It doesn't matter who owns the home.
Okay.
It would be an appurtenant easement that runs with the land in perpetuity. The only way to get rid of an appurtenant easement is both parties have to agree that it's no longer needed or necessary, and they can revoke the easement.
Okay.
So it's not a situation where if Levi and Neil moved, 5 years from now, that then all of a sudden somebody can come in and
it's back
change
to ground
that.
zero
But
on that decision.
also, that's where, if we were to move forward with the sale of that property, it would be very important for everybody involved to understand that that needs to be very, very well drawn out by an attorney that is going to build that easement if that was the way that things went, so that we know that's never in jeopardy. But
Well, one of the other things that I have a question on is, I appreciate the statement that the property owners have provided for us about their intent. I have a confusion in my mind. I know they're only asking for the original 40 issues, but with this, did I say issues? There's an issue here.
it's only one issue.
The 40 inches. But I'm still concerned about the city's intent with changing their required amount to 7.5 feet, and what that still leaves these property owners with a whole compliance question. And I would actually like some guidance from the city on how it would benefit the family if we did grant 40 inches. At this stage, I'm inclined to get more information about that specific issue and how the city would work with them. If the 40 inches is not going to gain anything, then the conversation can be pushed out. It was pointed out to us that just if we table it, it does not mean they can't bring it back. If we vote it down, it doesn't mean we can't have this discussion over. But I don't feel comfortable with the fact that the city has now changed the amount that will bring them into compliance. I would like some actual correspondence from the city about that. And is that possible, do you think, to reach out to them? I mean, I'm asking you again.
I can reach out to the city and ask again.
Discussion too, if you want.
We can send an emissary
Yeah,
to ask them what,
I've been ticked them off in a while, so.
yeah, I don't feel myself qualified to go in and ask the right questions. But
Well, here's my problem with the whole situation, and my question for you is, what does the school district gain by selling this property? Or giving easement? What's the gain? Goodwill, you can say?
part of the
goodwill?
gain is neighborhood goodwill, part of the,
Okay.
Monies.
part of the
But,
40
you know,
inches is.
we are responsible to the people that live here, the school board, and, it's not one of these things, I mean, we're the caretakers of this land.
Mhm.
And we're making a bargain where the school gets really nothing. We get goodwill, and we may get some money for it, but is that what we wanna do?
Well,
I
that's
mean-
the discussion we
Yeah.
had last time we met, is that a wise move to make
We have a certain
and
fiduciary
precedent to
responsibility
set, right,
to the public.
Absolutely.
agreed.
I don't disagree with that one bit.
As we all feel a little bit over the barrel because of the city's maneuverings here.
But, going to the city, if there's anything we can do in our power to get them to reconsider or somehow push this through, I would support anything we can do there,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
I think it's really their problem. They've caused this, and they're the ones that can correct it.
And I agree, Gary. I would also try to look at the flip side of that is what do we possibly lose? What we possibly lose is being able to construct something within that setback range at a future time. So if we don't own that property, but they have granted us an easement for total use of that property, we don't lose anything in terms of what do we have to use there, which is certainly important. My hang up on the area is we know that at some point something's going to happen with that school. It's old already, and something's going to happen. Maybe not while we're on the board, but something's going to happen. We don't know if we need that space to build on. That's a hang up for me, and it's impossible to know because we can't look into the future and say, oh yeah, this is what our layout would look like. We don't know.
That's why it's been a difficult conversation.
I think that I don't think that we're at the point right now where, at least personally, where I think that we need to say, let's put this issue to bed right this second, because there's more information or more influence perhaps that we can try to work out with the city and see if we can help these folks achieve what needs to be done. And I don't think that we got a fair shake from the City Planning and Zoning Commission report on the full set of facts of what has happened. And obviously the big thing is those percentages it's not like they filled up this entire lot with this giant concrete parking lot. That's not the case.
Yeah.
So personally, I do not want to move forward with a definitive decision at this point. Unless, obviously if a motion comes before we're going to deal with it. But
I'd be happy to give a motion to table this, table the issue.
I don't know that we need a motion to table it. I don't.
Yes,
We
you
do.
Please.
We do need a motion to table it, and I would entertain that then.
Okay, well, in that case, I will make a motion that we table this issue to get more information and see if we can't liaison with the city in some way and bring it back at a later date.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the property owners for being present here. We have some second reading of policy that is in our packet.
Okay. So you guys heard first reading was held on April 13th.
Yeah.
And I would just like to point out the edits and suggestions that were made to what we are discussing tonight in these policies. There was one edit in policy 4140. I think I got a little overzealous in the strikes on that policy. It started on the first page, last paragraph, and continued to page 2. That is now unstruck.
Yep.
And also in policy 4420, on page 2, in paragraph 6, there is a new strike. And that strike has to do with noticing our property. So this was a new policy, just bringing that back to your attention. It was convicted sex offender policy. But in that paragraph, it said, in addition, there shall be at least one notice posted every 660 feet along the property line. So as this policy went to first reading, you guys didn't have a question with that. I've reached out to our facility director, Matt Deal, starting this conversation. We looked at code, and we couldn't find that language in code anywhere. So I reached back out to ISBA and asked them about this model policy, which proceeded them to reach out to attorneys Anderson, Julian, and Hull. That was actually repealed a couple years ago, and that language changed. So they just hadn't updated their policy yet. Okay. So that's why that is now struck. So it's no longer required.
Are they paying you for that work you did? Okay.
So those are the changes there. And then, again, if we discuss these in first reading, I will entertain any questions if you had any further questions based off of what we discussed in first reading.
Is there anything else that caught your eye here? This is second reading on these policies, so we will be voting today. Okay. So there is a motion in. A motion for recommending.
Oh. Sorry, in second reading, I'm looking at my agenda request. I apologize, I did not put that in there.
So that's all right. Lonnie feels skilled enough to make a motion on these.
We have to do them individually, correct?
Well,
Or
not the new ones. We usually can
The
I mean, I'll throw them all in.
there's amended and there's
and
new.
there's new.
So
Two
the
different
amended
motions.
policies are
4140 and 4420.
And are you
no,
asking?
4420 is new. 4140 is amended
No, I
and
thought we meant amended up since first reading.
oh well yeah.
Yeah.
And 3545 is amended. You're talking about whether these are
What can be new?
these
And the new stuff can be clumped together and the old stuff can be
Correct.
clumped
So
together?
the revisions are 3545,
yeah that's
4140,
and 40
4210,
Okay.
and
Those are-
I think that the 4400, 4410, 4420.
correct. The remaining
and
policies
5260 are all new.
are all new.
So we'll hear a motion on the
I apologize, board, for not putting a
revised
motion in there.
three policies
Okay.
first.
I move to approve the amended policies 3545, student interviews, interrogations, or arrests, 4140, visitors to schools, and 4210, community use of school facilities.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on those three revised policies? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. I will hear another motion for the new policies.
I move that we approve new board policies 4400, relations with law enforcement and child protective agencies, 4410, investigations and arrests by police, 4220, sex offenders, and 5260, abused and neglected child reporting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on those new policies?
I would like to make a note that sex offender is policy 4420, not 4220.
It's a numbers thing.
Is that what I
Sorry,
said?
yes.
Yes, okay.
Go to the tape.
Duly noted.
Replay.
Any other discussion?
I'll still second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion also passes. That brings us to the end of our board action items, and we're open for announcements. Superintendent Albertson, do you have any announcements to make?
Real quick, it's been a, lengthy meeting, but
Yeah.
spring sports are in full swing right now in our secondary schools. I do want to report to the board that in almost all of our opening positions, we have a very deep candidate pool, which is very nice to see. And also, we're in the midst of starting our state exams on our ISAT testing, so that's pretty widespread. So,
Great, that is, thank you. I can hear any announcements. Do you have any announcements,
I
Phil?
have a very important one. I hope you guys are hungry because tomorrow I expect everybody in here to go to Papa Murphy's
Pizza.
Oh.
to support the Clark Fork
Yeah.
Senior Night.
That's the senior night fundraiser at Papa Murphy's. Good call on that. Is there any, Geraldine Meyer for the high school?
Exciting news, a previous graduate from Sandpoint High School spent his first year at University of Idaho in ROTC and was just got his appointment to the Naval Academy. James Griffin and his mom is Donna Griffin, one of
Oh,
our
yes.
transportation drivers.
Yes,
So,
excellent.
super exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Is there anything you'd like to report, Andrea? What do we have? Any report? report, Melinda?
Good things at the Homeschool Academy. Attendance is huge. It's
Good.
really going well.
Good. Brian? Okay. With that, I would hear a motion to
You were gonna go.
move, I didn't do it. I would hear a motion to move into executive
Thought you
session.
needed a pen.
Oh,
I move that we move into executive session as provided for in Idaho Code Title 74, Section 206, subsection 1B, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, or public school student, to consider labor contract matters authorized under Section 74-206, 1A and B Idaho Code.
Second.
Moved and seconded, we'll have a roll call vote.
roll call vote, trustee Kelly,
Aye.
trustee Superger,
Aye.
trustee Decker,
Aye.
trustee Williams,
Aye.
Chair Lewis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next time, could you memorize that motion for us? So with that, we'll move into executive session and our meeting is